Mike,
Martin,
welcome.
thank you very
This is such a
much.
pleasure. I am so looking forward to today. You're one of the few executives that I know have walked the shop floor and have led at an executive level in the boardroom. So I'm really eager to hear your life story and the lessons learned, and hopefully we can really share some good nuggets along the way.
I hope there's some to dig out.
Yeah, well, let's start with the first thing. Like, what is your fondest memory from your early part of your career?
Ooh, boy. Fondest memory from the early part of my career was several years after graduating with an engineering degree and working in construction management. I got the opportunity to build the pilot plant at Merck Pharmaceuticals for the HPV, human papillomavirus vaccine. So it was going to be the first one that they used to get FDA approval. And then start making their initial run of vaccines for distribution before they made it to scale.
Right.
And so I, at 28 years old, was part of a small, part into what has been a very successful vaccine that protects children from, human papillomavirus, a cancer that could be sexually transmitted. And so that was really the biggest highlight of mine.
Very meaningful job.
Very meaningful,
Yeah.
yeah. So
By the way, how long did it take to build that?
it was about 18 months
18
to
months.
build that, yeah. And it was, when you're building something like that, sterility and safety is paramount. So you're not rushing anything. And the amount of air that you need to change in a room to actually make sure that there's, it's a positive pressure in that room, to make sure that nothing's getting in there is quite an expensive project too.
Well, if you think about that to our most recent epidemic with COVID-19, right, what an amazing feat it is to put out a vaccine like that in such a short period of time. If it took forever to build a factory with all of the sanitation things you had to get in. Now, again, this is not a vaccine conversation, and we're definitely not talking about whether we believe in it or not. That's not the topic. It's just the interest of how time has moved and how quickly we can do things nowadays.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you think of technology, which is a big part of what we're going to talk about today, is like, back in the day when companies were implementing SAP, it was really an ugly system, right? It was a bare bone, Windows based, really just nobody really thought much of it as a sexy tool. Now we're talking about something that's somewhat more sophisticated. You're loading AI on top of it. There's just a whole bunch of things, right? And I know we're going to jump around a lot, but just if you think of AI and where it's going compared to kind of maybe your youth and what you were doing and building at the time, how do you see that playing into businesses and executives' decision making?
Well, if I were to be truly honest with you, Martin, the last couple of years I've been really focused on delivering a turnaround of a lubricants business, and really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to where AI was, and it kind of has hit me a bit by surprise in the last year and a half with ChatGPT coming out, and then how quickly some of the followers have been able to catch up with them so quick. Clearly, once you get enough of the data that is so hard to pull in from across the various organizations out there, decision making should be able to be sped up, and give the executives who, I was once given advice by a CEO of one of the companies I used to work for in a private conversation. He said, "Mike, you need to become, as you get further up into your career, more and more comfortable making decisions where there's a lot of gray." Right. I'm an engineer by training. I was pretty black and white, for a lot of my career. And I think the AI AI revolution is going to allow those executive decision makers to feel much more comfortable at making decisions with a lot more gray than what they've had before.
Right. Speaking of black and white, one of my favorite stories, and from one engineer to another, I remember my third year of university, you're doing third year math, you're calculating down to like the fourth decimal accuracy, and you're really working. I was doing structural engineering, so it was really about getting down to that really minute decimal to be able to do a design for a beam or a building or whatever.
So you're a civil engineer as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so am I.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And then got to my fourth year, and we were doing these intricate designs again, and we gave our paper to the structural professor, and he said, okay, the answer is correct, but did you consider a safety factor? And I'm like, what do you mean a safety factor? This is, you, for 4 years you've taught me how to do this to the level of nth degree. And he says, yeah, but math is math, but we don't know what the real life offers. You know, something could happen. Like, you got to put a safety factor in there. And I said, well, what safety? And he goes, well, that depends on your experience and all this stuff. And that time we said, make it 2. And that was the first time I realized that precision is only as good as it matters in the moment. Because when you start adding safety factors, that's a fudge factor.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the same with business.
Yeah.
You can't design a perfect business. You can't design a perfect process. You can't design a perfect system. There's quote unquote fudge factors.
Well, that's why we have contingencies on everything.
That's why we have
budget.
contingencies.
Right.
Exactly. Now, if you think of it in that sense, right? Are there any stories that come to mind in terms of how you've had to be able to have a contingency for something that came about, that you had a perfect plan, you rolled it out, you were marching towards it, but something happened?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very funny. Probably my third year of engineering school, we learned about the safety factor as well, and we were told about a case, a real life case. If I'm remembering it correctly, it occurred in Kansas City, where a skyway or a dance floor was built at a hotel that collapsed with people on it.
Right.
And one of the factors, when it comes to being precise, that they were imprecise on, was they didn't factor in the weight of the paint on the structure. And so you need safety factors in case you miss something like that. But it also, you know, as a structural engineer, you know, person myself, you still need a degree of precision, of which, by the way, AI might be one of those opportunities to make sure that we don't miss these type of critical calculations going forward because of just human error. Now, to answer your question about when did I use a contingency factor in there, and I will say that you're very familiar with a supply chain transformation project that I did at Sicko,
Right.
A lubricants business, where the field folks were having a hard time coming around to understanding what was the aim, what was the goal, and therefore adopting some of the new processes and practices and really the learnings that we were trying to teach them. And you'll recall that we got towards the end of what was going to be the originally agreed engagement. And my team just was, maybe they got the intellectual property, but they hadn't yet put it into place. And we need to make sure that the organizational change was going to stick and not just be, okay, we hit our implementation point, we're done. And so, you know, we did not have budgeted in contingency in there, but, you know, we spent more than $1 million more on the engagement just to make sure and to keep, you know, your experts around until our people became that much comfortable with using it. So, and ultimately, no one asked me a single question about the additional monies that I spent, you know, on that project, because we implemented and we got it and it was sustainable.
And the value.
And the value was being delivered.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're going to come back to that.
Okay.
There's some good stories there. One of the things that I want to talk about specifically with regard to safety factors or contingencies is that supply chains, typically, their version of a safety factor is buffer, right? They buffer in inventory, they buffer in time, we'll put a little extra time in it, we'll add a little extra day to the lead time, we'll build, you know, maybe we need 2 or 3 more people. There's always buffers, we're always buffering, we're always building safety factors if you want, right? And as engineers, we kind of go like, well, do you need it? We understand the reason for it, but the question is 2 enough? Is 4 enough? Is 5 the right number? And the area in particular where we see a lot of buffering is inventory, because it's a symptom of a process, it's a symptom of a bad use of the technology, right? So people buffer. They're like, I'm going to make sure I'm not going to run out of inventory here.
Well, because they're afraid of what's going to happen when they run out of inventory.
That's right, because somewhere somebody said, if you ever run out,
That's your job.
You're dead to me, right? That's your job. And so, of course, those fear factors come in. And human nature is you want to self-protect, right?
Right,
And so there's
right.
it's natural. But the area that I find fascinating is that often people go like, it's not about inventory. In some cases, that's true. They don't have an issue with having deep pockets, so they can buy more inventory if they need it. It's all about customer service. The challenge with that thinking is that if you're not trying to optimize your inventory, you're continually perpetuating bad processes, bad behaviors,
Yep.
bad data use, all of that stuff. You're basically saying it's okay. So you're not just wasting your working capital, you're wasting time, you're wasting people's energy, all of that stuff that comes with it. Give me a little bit about your experiences in the past about that.
Well, let me give you the story about when I first learned about inventory control. I was 16 years old, and it was a summer before my junior year in high school.
Yeah.
And I started working for Pizza Hut. And first and foremost, I got hired, and then I was told, this is the first day you arrive. And I arrived before the store opened for its customers. And the restaurant manager who had hired me had been changed out,
Right.
and the new restaurant manager had no idea I was coming. And so he, I think what he was trying to do on that very first day was get me to quit, because he didn't know I was coming in, and he probably was thinking head count right there. How many of these extra
I need him?
part-time people do I need? Do I need one? Do I need two? Do I need five? And so the first thing he had me do once I put on my Pizza Hut apron was go behind a 600-degree pizza oven that was about maybe 13, 14 inches away from the wall. And he says, go back behind there and clean the entire wall of the grease that had splattered out of the oven onto the wall. And I did it. I was expecting, I think he was expecting me to say, that's it, I quit, but I actually did it.
Rolled up the sleeves.
I rolled up the sleeves, and I got the grease all over the sleeve still, and then the apron. So I earned my greasy apron pretty quick. But over the course of that summer working there, you would get a break, and you were able to make yourself a pizza or whatever, and you had to put it into the system. I, for one, got sick and tired of having a cheese or a pepperoni pizza every single day.
Right.
And I was working the pizza line at that point, and I cut up a pepper, and I stuffed it with mozzarella cheese and sausage and some other stuff. And I stuck it into the pizza oven about halfway through, and it came out the other side, and this store manager saw it come out the other side. And who did this? Who made this stuffed pepper? Me. I'm the one that's on break. He's like, no, you can't be doing that. We have inventory to control around here. We need to know every pepper and what it's being used on and every scoop of that. And, to a 16-year-old kid, it didn't dawn on me that this might be something that's important. Right. So that was, the first opportunity.
I'm impressed that Pizza Hut's got that level of inventory control.
I don't know if they have that level of inventory control either. I just think this was a boss that wanted to make sure I remembered him, 40 years later, and we're pretty close, so.
So what I liked about what you connected there for me was hands-on, right? You're an executive. I've come to know you as somebody as a very hands-on executive, lead by example, ask good questions, drill into it. You don't just sit back at 10,000 feet and kind of just allow things to happen.
No.
Share a bit about, is there something that came to you? Did an experience that happened that made you kind of connect those dots between your Pizza Hut days when you had to scrub the grease off the back wall to, as a leader, to lead by example?
Yeah, there was not one particular situation, I would say, that I learned from that. I think it comes from my being raised in a family with a set of grandfathers that were hard hat guys, working on the plant floor. One of them put himself through college. The other one only had a high school degree. Both were very successful at working with people and being able to communicate with their team, their guys, to get things done. Right. And I would hear stories about that and the like. But, there is one particular example, I certainly remember, and that was, well, there's two. was interning in construction, building a FedEx warehouse facility at Newark International Airport.
Okay.
So 23 years old. And I was out there just trying to observe, making sure everyone was following their safety. And I was very critical of put your safety glasses on. I told you put your safety glasses on. And the carpenter superintendent really decided that he was going to give me a hard time because I was a young chip on the block.
Right.
And, it took a whole summer of him battling me, coming in, slamming his hard hat down, me taking that until I finally kind of learned that I needed to figure out how do I talk to him at his level? How do we partner to make sure that he's not mad and therefore not on the floor? And because he was a subcontractor, he wasn't, working directly for me, so I had to influence him. So that was a real interesting opportunity of just learning about, okay, you can't just come in from outside and think you know something.
Right.
Another opportunity that I learned from what's important, on the field. And this was several years later in the same field. I graduated college. First time I was being an assistant project manager on a site. And a change order came through. The owner wanted some different, piping systems or whatever it was. And my boss, the project manager, wanted me to review the quote that came in from the piping contractor and make sure that it's okay. And I literally went through that blueprint and I counted how many elbows, copper elbows, those are the 90-degree turns in a piping system, were in there. And I started arguing with the contractor's estimator on the number of 90-degree elbows that he put in. And he humored me. And we got to the point where he finally just said, okay, I'll agree with your number on the copper elbows. All right, great, let's move on. And then he says, before we do you know how much each copper elbow costs? No. 2.5 cents. We've just argued about this for some small, de minimis amount of dollars. I built a good, very relationship with him because he could understand, he understood my very precision-like thinking, and then me trying to understand how he's running a business and getting things through on the economic side of thing. And we became, pretty close working together. And when I left to go off to business school, he came to me and told me that whenever he writes his life story, he's going to write a chapter about me and he's going to entitle it Copper Elbows.
Did he ever write the book?
I had no idea.
But you touch on two really important things around leadership there. One is communication.
Yep.
And being able to adapt to the people you're talking to the audience.
Correct.
The second was prioritization. And I had a gentleman on here, Mark Cunningham, a few weeks ago, and he has an interesting way of defining prioritization. He talks about air, water, food. He says, you can take my food away, and after a few days, you may get my attention. He says, you take my air away, and within 30 seconds, you have my attention. How do you use that level of prioritization and communicate that correctly to the audience that has to hear it and then actually prioritize against your priority?
To get their attention about what are priorities for you and ultimately for the organization, first requires that you give your attention to them. So before you can worry about your air, you got to worry about the guys on the floor's air. And that means that you need to get out there and be with them. And give yourself up to taking feedback about what's not working for the guy on the floor or the lady on the line. And when they are vulnerable enough, feel that they can be vulnerable enough, that you're trusting them, that they give you that, you at that point need to take note of exactly what it is that is bothering them or the improvement that they say can be made. And when you walk away, you better have it in your head that you will find that solution very, very quickly. I've always done that in the field. And if you get their trust that you're going to take care of their air If you don't lie to them when they're saying they're suffocating and you're just saying, no, you're fine.
Right.
This is a food problem, not a water or an air problem. Once you have dedicated yourself to that, that's when you tell them, I need some air, they will come rushing with the oxygen mask for you. 100%.
I love that. That is such a good leadership quality. Just to rephrase that, right? For somebody to understand the importance of my air, I need to understand their air.
Yes.
And then work towards that.
Yep.
I love that. Because too often executives just put some metrics out there and say, okay, we're going to drop our cost by X and Y. Go do that. And then there's nothing. You don't understand the current challenges they're facing, the personal relationships they're dealing with at home. Like it's always, at the end of the day, it's never just the job, right? It's everything that's wrapped around it.
And that's what the C-suite thinks is that, okay, we need to drop, the cost by X% because the air that they're learning to hear about is the shareholders' air, and the board of directors' air. And for those of us that, find a niche in our careers at bridging, the boardroom to the plant floor, you have to understand the air of everyone that's a stakeholder.
Yeah.
But at those other extremes within the organization, from the shareholder and boardroom to the person with the boots and the hard hat on who's actually really making the value out there, they don't understand the opposite extreme. Right. And there are certainly some very good CEOs, very good board of directors who have walked the lines, right? And they get it. And they also are looking for those individuals like myself that has made a career of trying to translate, from, boardroom to boots and boots to boardroom.
That whole shop floor to boardroom thing is so important. To me, it's like you can't teach somebody how to drive a car if you've never driven a car. I just can't tell you, right? And one of the things that, how we met was, you were actually trying to find a solution for the production planning team.
Yep.
The guys on the ground.
Yep.
You ran SAP within this big organization in Citgo, and that piece didn't have a solution. And you really wanted to feed their air. You wanted to make sure that they had something to work with.
That's right.
And from there, obviously, then the goodness that came from that, obviously, it gave you a lot of business value out of it. But I love that you were able to connect those dots for people.
I think one of the lessons that I learned early in life, too, was being probably a middle schooler. And my father worked in a hospital system. He ran the hospital system, CEO. And I went in to visit him one day, and he gave me a tour around the hospital. And it was amazing to me that as a 14, 12-year-old, whatever I was, that he knew the name of every doctor to every janitor. And they would say, hello, Mr. Curtis. And he'd reply back to them with their name. And I remember, being in school and saying, I don't even know the name of all the teachers in my school. And I looked at him, I'm like, how do you know everyone's name? And he says, it matters. These are real people. And he too had to be able to walk that line of communicating with a doctor and also communicating with the janitor, and making them all understand what was in the best interest of the hospital organization.
That's right. So let's talk a bit about that. Let's get a little practical, specifically on something more recent. So we did a transformation together. We've alluded to it a couple of times now, that not only gave you significant business values in the millions of dollars, but it also was able to transform the people. And that, to me, is the more important part. I know the word transformation gets thrown around a lot. But in this case, it really did. We changed the people's lives by the way they work, making life easier, and truly making them be able to rise above the day-to-day minutiae, if you want.
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
Tell me a bit about that experience for you, and how did it make you feel from an executive perspective that you were investing in your people, not just in some technology?
So I'll take a half step back and say that one of the individuals that we worked with Reveal and myself on my leadership team for this project had worked with me at another business unit within Sitco. And on my first day in that business unit, where it was also another function, it was their procurement function, where they were not using SAP to its fullest extent, that we really needed to invest in processes. That's what I came in there thinking.
Right.
We need to invest in the processes. And Stephanie, on day 2 or so of that job, I had my first one-on-one with Stephanie, and she looks at me and she says, "Mike, all we need is just a little bit of love."
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it hit me straight in the heart, right? And I learned that, it is about the processes, but you can't invest in a process if your people have been robbed of air and water, right? So when we brought you in to help us in the transformation, I again probably was very much thinking that this is a process, investment, but quickly realized in walking through Reveal's pre-deployment exercises that no, this one again is the people need our love.
A little love.
Little love. And and the fact that we spent as much time and energy and slowed it down where we had to make sure that there was the investment in their skill sets, the investment in their knowledge, the investment of time was going to be the key factor in our approval, in our success. And that was very much true. It was very, very much true. And in fact, actually, we were able to invest enough at the middle and lower levels of the organization that I think they even got that better than those that were on my own leadership team. Because we didn't invest as much time in those leaders as we did, for the supervisors and the plant floor schedulers and planners.
Right. And love doesn't always come easy.
I'm sorry?
Giving love doesn't always come easy.
No, giving love is it's not easy. You need to give just the right amount of love and still hold accountability out there.
Which comes back to your earlier point about vulnerability-based trust.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. You got to have that relationship to be able to have healthy conflict and conversations, to be able to hold each other accountable to these things.
Well, and you saw it. We struggled with that as a team, and we had some management transitions during that period where we'd have to start from again and again. But there is always the trust amongst peers sometimes is harder than trust vertically in the organizational change, which reminds me of another story where I actually learned a lot on my leadership style from my father. It was back right out of college in those construction management days, and I remember calling home and he's asking me how my job is, and I keep answering questions, and unbeknownst to me, apparently I was referring to James, someone who was a peer of mine on another project quite often in a series of phone calls. And he turns, at one point in the phone call, he says, "Mike, it's not a competition. The two of you are on the same team." And it dawned on me that, I'm literally at times have been trying to compete to get him to the photocopier faster than him. And that was another very maturing moment that says, I have to work with my peers. They're not my competitors. Right. And that's something when you do a transformational project that is cross-functional like that, where it hits every element of our organization like it did. It hits supply chain, manufacturing, hits sales, hits back office.
Right.
They need to get understood. That's my job as a leader to make sure that they understand. This is not a competition.
Right.
We're all one team. We're all supposed to be working, together.
Yeah.
And that can always be. That sometimes is the hardest part of change management.
Yeah.
Than it is actually the vertical up and down and getting the supervisors
it's the
and
peer accountability that you just got to. So I've heard communicate in their language. I've heard cross-functional teamwork. I've heard give a little love. Right. these are many of your prioritization. These are many of your leadership style that's coming to the fore through a series of experiences, right? Everything from 16-year-old Mike at Pizza Hut, right? If you look towards your future of your career and you're looking towards where you want to go next and what you want to do, give me a sense of kind of the Mike that you will bring to an organization from an executive perspective that will just bring the amount of value that I know comes from you, that oozes from you. But if somebody had to hear this from the outside, like what exactly are the things that stand out for you from a leader's point of view?
Well, we talked about boots to boardroom,
Yeah.
right? To me, another way for the CEO that you're asking about, the hypothetical CEO,
Sure.
is to hear about it is from strategy to execution.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, going forward, what I'm looking for is an organization that wants to improve upon itself, either accelerate the growth that they're already on or stop a slip because technology is changing,
Right.
because their competitors have outpaced them, and find a means to get the leadership team together, aligned, in delivering on the goals that the CEO has for us, or if I'm the CEO, the board
Right.
would have for us. And then communicating that well. You already mentioned that's number one. Communicate to the folks out, beyond the C-suite, beyond middle management,
Right.
what that we love them,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're, everyone says that, people are our greatest asset. That's what every company says.
Right.
So I need to not just say that. I need to be able to.
They need to say
articulate
that you believe it.
that
Right.
articulate that we.
Right.
It's not just your greatest asset. We love you, and we're investing,
Right.
in you. So doing that in an environment where the translation between the boardroom and those wearing the boots is critical is something that I want to continue to do. I've been able to turn around a couple of organizations, make them very profitable, or much more effective and efficient, and as a cost center. And so that's the niche that I think that I've been given the gift of being able to deliver to United States, to the world,
Yeah.
to the world, because I've actually even done this not just in the United States. I've done this in Angola, Africa.
I was going to say, I mean, you have truly got some worldwide experience. In the turmoil that we're living in right now, and you can, good or bad, how it doesn't really matter, because in my mind, the turmoil now is no different than it was 5, 10, 20 years ago. Every year, every season has its own version of turmoil, right?
That's true. That's true.
How would you tackle 2025's turmoil right now if you walked into a CEO role?
Without having the benefit of foresight, I would probably have to fall back on a couple of different experiences that I had in crisis management. And one was at a driller that I used to work for. And we had an unfortunate fatality incident. Again, something that is dramatic, that shakes up the organization as much as tariffs and other other economic policy-making decisions will be having on the supply chain in any organization. It's going to be dramatic. First, you did in those instances was, well, one, you had to communicate to everyone. I had to be the one who informed the CEO of the unfortunate incident, the loss of life, with a sense of empathy, and get that individual's support for doing whatever you needed to do to handle that crisis. And that included getting onto your network and calling whoever you needed to call. I in this instance, called one friend who led me to a business owner out of Houma, Louisiana, who volunteered his own personal jet to fly the family of the deceased down from their home. And so, if that's a corollary you can think about, it is know that it'll be a surprise, know that it'll be a shock, Look within your network and find your allies who you can work with together to solve the immediate problem. If it's a more slow burning crisis, which we might be seeing in 2025, we really don't know. Tomorrow is supposed to be Liberation Day, but we don't know what Liberation Day is and how long it will be. And look, it's gonna cascade through the economy, but at what scale we really don't know. You got to think about it a little bit more like we thought about it with the Ebola crisis in Western Africa about 2014, 2013 timeframe. And there it is, you pull in all the safeguards that would say that you can to isolate yourself from that catastrophe. I was working for Pacific Drilling at the time. We had drill ships offshore Nigeria. We had to come up with ways that would get our international as well as our Nigerian crews onto the rigs, make sure that they weren't sick before they went on out there. And if it's not quite like COVID where everyone's ultimately going to pick up a portion of it. And it is very highly contagious.
It is, yeah.
Was what would you do to, what's the word? Isolate. Sorry. What would you do to isolate the sick person on the hospital there, and how do you get them off without him getting any more people sick on that? And so what you're thinking through in that kind of a slow burning crisis, because that's even slower than COVID or slower than COVID, certainly much slower than the fatality incident or the like, is that in that case you are really trying to stockpile what you need, and organizations have been doing that now for the last several months. At my last location, we were importing Canadian base oil. Before he started talking about that specifically, that's just say, well, we won't have to worry about the host now. You have the storage costs, which are relatively cheap compared to what you were seeing on the tariff basis. So, long story, short answer, I suppose, is depending upon how quickly you need to act, you need to find allies who could strategically work with you in a moment's notice, or look at how you can build. I hate to say the word resiliency on yourself, to keep the costs under control.
I'm hearing you got to draw from your partnerships.
Yep.
Right, you really got to reach out across boundaries, right?
Yep.
You got to be resilient. I'd rather refer to it as agility. You got to have
Agility,
you got to be
yep,
agile,
yep,
right?
Yep.
And then being able to lead, right? And then say, okay, now that I know the priorities, now that I've communicated it, now let's
But
get
that's another opportunity where you have already told your people, or you've already listened to your people about what they need for their air.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're telling them this is our air.
Right.
And if you built that trust with everyone on an organization, they're going to understand what that means.
Yeah.
Martin, you asked me what I thought the CEOs need to be thinking about now with the uncertainty that we're seeing out there. I want to flip that question back onto you, because I could, admittedly, the last several years, I've had a pretty much heads down focus on transforming a business and only that one business. And, AI wasn't going to be in that blueprint for the immediate future. What do you think in the disruptiveness of AI and technology? What does a CEO need to know, or what should I know so I can help a CEO translate that down to others in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is technology is going to move at the speed way beyond we can even imagine. There's an interesting story about some scientist who was looking towards the positive of AI and saying, okay, what vaccines can it generate, or ideas can it create as solutions to the current diseases we have?
Right.
And then as it was doing that, it was also producing, on the opposite side, chemical warfare related options. And when they realized it was doing that at the same time, it was solving it, just realized the danger in some of these technologies that exist. So I think for CEOs going to the future, I think we should not think AI is a silver bullet or the panacea of the next thing. We have to adopt technology 100%, but more in light of it being able to be something that can help move the business forward and specifically enhance the people that are working for us. Because in my mind, businesses exist for people. I know it's a radical thought, usually it's more the other way around. I work for the business, and I get that. But we're a human race, for crying out loud. I mean, businesses are human constructs that we put together to be able to help the human race move forward, right? Either through economically or some form of fashion. So I think when as a CEO is thinking about it, the people have to be on the forefront of his mind. Agility has to be on the forefront. You can only plan that far ahead, as you said. You got to have the right technology in place. But I also believe that technology isn't the only solution. I don't think it's going to be, especially AI. Now it's coming, fast and furious for sure. It's in everything that we do nowadays. I mean, Siri has actually been around for 5-6 years on an iPhone. So it's AI. But I think it's going to come down to what extent can we empower the humans still that work with us to really gain the benefit from it and enhance their lives. That way, business will get better going forward.
Okay, so now translate that to someone who's on a plant floor somewhere.
Yeah, right. So in my mind, that would be so I've got a shop floor guy who's building something, right? The only way that they know how to do it is the way they've been doing it for the last 10 years.
Most expensive 7 words.
Seven most expensive words in business, right?
Yeah.
I've always been doing it that way.
Yeah.
Or I've always done it that way. Exactly. And that's true for all humans. And also when we get pushed outside of our comfort zone, we go back to what we know, right? So we default back to...
We don't like change.
We don't like change. I mean, there's an old comedy picture out there that says, who wants change? And everybody's hands go up. And then they ask, who wants to change? And nobody hands go up, right? That's true for the shop floor guy too. And I think where technology plays a role for them is to say, how can I bring data to them? Very similar to what our phones do now is it prompts us with stuff, right? We don't have to go look for it. It tells us. If you give it relevant information, it could really help speed up that process. And it's also forcing in some regards the guys on the shop floor to possibly challenge themselves to go beyond their considered limits, right? There's this notion of finding your genius, the thing that makes you what you're good at and what makes you happy. And then the things that limit you are my incompetence, right? I don't know what I don't know. Or it could be something that I'm really good at and I get stuck in mediocrity because that's just, I'm good at it, right? And then there's the one where you're really good at it, you're creating a lot of value and it's really generating all the right stuff, but it's not what I want to do. Like it doesn't give me oxygen, right? And understanding those limits is so important for every human being, no matter what level you're at, so that you can find that genius.
This particular single panel cartoon has become a many used arrow in my quill over the last couple of years. In the background of the image is a dog sledder racing along with all of his dogs in front, pulling them hard and fast. Right. And in the foreground, you have a dog sledder standing on his sled, but every single one of the dogs are in the back, shoving the dog sledder from his back, one behind the other. The front dog is actually pushing the dog sledder, and the second dog's pushing the next dog, and then you got the third or fourth dog with these bulging eyes that he does not have the air that we've been talking about. I have used that cartoon at least on 15 different occasions to communicate my transformational story to the boardroom and to the plant floor and to customers and to suppliers, and saying, that. And the big aha is that dog sledder who's not using his dogs properly is looking over into the background and sees this dog slide by and it goes, or oh, right. And that was to me a pivotal tool to get everyone to understand that we need to get the dogs in front right, before we can win a race.
Yeah.
Where did Reveal find that? What was the story of that comic that you guys have used in your presentations that was such an epiphany for me?
I don't know if I can actually pinpoint the actual originating area of it, but we're always looking for visuals or graphics that articulate a concept. The other one that is fairly commonly used too, but is the analogy of the duck that's gliding across the water, right? And you don't ever see the feet going crazy.
Yep.
Right? That's another version of that idea. So that would be where you're trying to illustrate that people are working really hard, but it doesn't look like it.
Right.
Or to at least is the outsider's view. The dog sledding one that you talk about is this all this work we're doing, and we think we're doing the right thing. We're pushing the sled, and we think this is how it's supposed to work. And then you look over and you're like, oh, that looks better and easier.
Well, the interesting difference between those two ideas is that, at least with a dog sled, with everyone who's an outsider can see that that's not working.
That's not working, right?
Everyone can see that. The king has no clothes, so someone has to tell him that. The duck, everyone that's standing on the shore side, he looks like everything's just fine, even though it may not be.
It may not be. And the challenge is that most organizations are like the duck.
Right.
Right? From an executive perspective, you got your metrics in place, and everybody looks like they're just gliding along the top of the lake. The challenge with that, the feet underneath the water, in relation to the dog sledding one you talk about, is that we don't understand how technology can help us with some of the technologies we have, especially technologies like SAP. It's been around since the late 80s, actually late 70s, and then in the 80s and the 90s became popular.
Well, and then just this year became once again the largest company.
That's right,
in
Germany, right? That's right. And so you've got this technology that is embedded in I don't know what the percentage is, but like 80% of the world. It runs like 90% of the transactions of the world. It's like unbelievable numbers, right?
Well, it runs on SAP.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And yet nobody, 94% of companies we've surveyed for 15 years now, say they're not exploiting the software the way they should, or not maximizing it, which means they're the guys on the sled where the dogs are pushing them, right? And they don't know it. So what it feels like is the feet under the water. Like they're working really hard. They really feel like this is just the way it's supposed to be.
That's what SAP is. It's not user friendly, and it's just tedious. And this is everyone from a shop steward to a maintenance supervisor to a production planner is kicking and screaming underneath the water. But they think that that's just the way it's supposed to be.
That's the way,
right. And that's where Reveal, has this innate opportunity to come back and lift the curtain, and so you can actually see all this spinning underneath water, and you're like, wait a minute, and where the dog sled now slides back, because that's how it's supposed to be. Stop the presses.
Which is part of the name, right? It's to reveal the hidden value. Anyway, so the notion is just like, how do you teach people to use technology, no matter the technology? Because keep in mind, you got to teach people how to use ChatGPT at some point. You're going to have to teach them how to use AI. Like garbage in, garbage out, right? If you just take a closed AI and you give it a bunch of really bad data, it's going to give you some really bad results and decisions to work off of, until it refines itself and gets better. And you got to keep feeding it with good stuff. And so when you think of that analogy of the dog sled, it's all about empowering the people to really understand how to use the technology they have.
Do you think, given what you just said, that the education system that we have here in the United States are producing graduates out of high school, or even college for that matter, to be able to ask the right questions, experiment, use this technology for transformation? I have a daughter who is a senior in high school, and the argument this last weekend was, you're still 3 chapters behind on Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And she's like, I hate this book. Why am I learning this? And I'm like, well, because I learned it. Are we teaching, kids how to do math as opposed to data science, or how to use these technologies to actually advance our educational curiosity.
I don't, and I've also have two daughters that are now fully grown, and they went through the education system in the States, and I think that look, it's still one of the better educations in the world, even though the numbers are pretty low, but still in relation to the 180 countries, But I think there's two things that are missing in the education system, and maybe I'll add the third one because you touched on it, curiosity. One is first principles, and as an engineer, you'll appreciate this, is understanding the understanding. Really understand it, because you won't be able to grasp anything outside of it. Otherwise, you're just a symptomatic user, right? If you don't understand first principles. The second one then is related to critical thinking. We don't teach critical thinking.
No, we don't anymore.
We teach 1 + 1 = 2. But what about if 1 isn't exactly 1? What does that look like? And that critical thinking is significantly missing. Actually, it's one of the things we teach when we help companies use SAP more effectively, is to teach people, say, okay, now that you see this data coming,
what's it mean?
What does it mean?
Right.
And what is it? How does it impact Mike? And how does it impact that guy? Right. And what's the critical thinking around it? And what can I do back at first principles level that will prevent it from coming back again? Right. And so it's that cycle thinking. And then curiosity. Oh my word, that's one of my favorite. To me, that's probably a leader's single biggest characteristic of a good leader is curiosity. Looking always to figure out, is there better ways to do things? How can I be better in either leading people, finding solutions, or driving a business? It's curiosity. It's that interest to find out what else. And I think we miss that too. And I think depending on the school systems, you'll get versions of that, right? But I think overarchingly, I think no, we're all sucked into our little devices, and it's basically, it's not very creative.
No, it's not. But I fret that it goes a little bit beyond just we're stuck onto our devices. Because yes, you can always, I can always take and put into my calculator what is 7 times 35 and get the quick answer, right? But it should have been algebra that taught me that I can take 7 and then multiply it by 30 and add 7 and multiply it by 5 to get to that right answer. But no one, this is back in the 80s and 90s, no one taught me. They just taught me you always just do the long form algebra and calculate it out.
That's right.
And all that stuff. They don't teach you that, well, hold on a minute, we're actually giving you these principles, to apply to something outside of a classroom. And it's that curiosity, I feel, that we're just teaching to a test, and this is how you get the number versus okay, so what does it mean in your real life? Oh, knowing algebra means I can, break things apart any number of different ways and come up with a solution, that is the easiest. So I know that's a diversion, but it was something, when important. You said, we need an educated workforce to be able to take advantage of all this. Well, you also need to teach that critical thinking, the curiosity, and the principles.
Well, because you got to teach people to learn. Right.
Yes. And that's exactly what we had to do when we brought you in. We had to teach. We had individuals when we told them that they were going to be taking a test who got freaked out about I haven't had to take a test in 30 years. Well, why haven't you taken a test in 30 years? Because I haven't been in school for 30 years, which means I haven't had to learn something,
It's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so teaching people to learn is that critical thinking component, the first principles, do something about it. Because otherwise, again, teaching is a single dimension. I teach you 1 + 1 = 2, done.
Right.
But if you teach them the algebra, as you said, or the base roots of it, you can solve any problem.
That's right.
That's right.
And that's exciting.
It's exciting.
It's exciting when it finally dawns on you. I just don't need to memorize 12 times 12 = 144. Then all of a sudden, or I don't have to memorize this T code, but I can start thinking about it, from a different perspective and getting the data in from a different type of reporting mechanism. Yeah. The whole world opens up for you.
So if you think back of your life, you think of the biggest challenge you had to face. What is that, and how did you overcome it?
Well, the most difficult situation that I had to overcome is one that I'm still working on and trying to overcome right now. And that's really with working as a family with my daughter through the process of where's she going to go to school. And you would think that that's a simple solution for anybody. She did not get into her dream school, so that left her disappointed. So you're dealing with those emotions and trying to empathize with her. Even if her mother and I, my wife and I, thought that dream school was probably not good for her, so in the end it was probably a blessing.
Yeah.
You're dealing with the empathy of that. But you're dealing with someone who is 18 years old and looking at what is the right decision for the immediate next 4 years. And we as the parents are looking at this over a lifelong time. And, that is very, very hard to translate. We talked about how you translate from CEO to the plant floor. How do you translate to an 18-year-old that decisions she's going to make now, where she's very myopic, is going to factor in 40, 50 years from now? And look, I went to school to be a civil engineer, and here I am running a lubricants and grease business, right? So I'm not to say that, she needs to make the right decisions, but I don't want her making decisions solely on the politics or the social justice of the day.
Right.
And so what we've been able to try to do there is sit her down and talk, at her level, trying to bring it back to these are the myopic things that you should be thinking about in addition to what is on your mind, to try to help her make what is the right decision or what we think is the right decision, for her. And whichever decision she takes, we'll love her and we'll support her and we'll be very proud of her. She's, a good student and she'll do a great job wherever she goes. But, what we're trying to do, my wife and I, are trying to look out for what is the right environment for her to be successful in. And does it play to her strengths and her weaknesses, without necessarily telling her what her weaknesses are, right? I don't think it would be fair for us to tell her this is, blatantly, this is where your foresight is missing, but because we don't want to crush, ideas. So that's been a challenge, and there is, it's a humbling experience, and it's something that I think in the future will continue to grow the empathy in me on when I'm trying to help people make that difficult decision or come to understand the ramifications of a decision that they may not have liked that was made somewhere else. And using care and love and respect is something that I think you have to use when you're trying to make those decisions.
Yeah, that's good. Somebody once said to me, we often say to our kids, make good decisions. And a lot of it has got to do with us knowing the consequences that they're not thinking about. But the bigger question usually is around, have we taught them how to think? Because the decision is a consequence of the thinking. That's right. Right? Yeah. And so it's more about, not so much about, make good decisions when they leave the front door. It's more like, let's hope we've taught them the right things to make the right decisions, to understand the consequences. That's right. Mike, what a pleasure. I've had the pleasure to know you for some time now. We've worked together. We've hung out together. Your insights are amazing. I look forward to your next adventure. I think that you will be enjoying whatever that looks like for yourself, just because of your mindset, your approach to life, the way you think about things. You're clear-headed, you're smart, you're wise, all of the above. And it's not just the gray hair, it's wisdom that comes from experience. So I appreciate the time and thank you for coming out.
I would have objected to all of that in the past, but it's something that I've recently learned is just to say thank you.
Thank you.
And before we go, I do want to say congratulations on 20 years for Reveal. Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
You guys have really built an organization that is transformative, that your people work to be interweaved into the culture, and that makes our projects so successful, so fun. And it's been an honor to work with you, and I can't wait for the next opportunity to do so again.
Well, thank you back.